All right, strap in everyone because today we are diving headfirst into the U.S. Army Field Manual on Survival.
The ultimate guide to staying alive.
Exactly. You guys sent us some pretty intense excerpts. Desert survival.
Mingle evasion.
Yeah. Even building shelters out of snow, the whole 9 yards.
And we can't forget the psychology of survival.
Oh, right. The manual really emphasizes that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it dives deep into that mental game.
Because, I mean,
It recognizes that fear and panic, they can be just as dangerous as any physical threat out there.
that's what's so fascinating to me about this whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about those cool survival tricks, you know? It's about, like, mastering your own mind when everything's hitting the fan.
Absolutely.
Like, what's more important? Knowing how to build a fire or knowing how to, like, keep your cool when everything's falling apart?
Well, ideally, you'd want both, right?
Right.
But this manual, it really stresses that a positive attitude and self-confidence can be just as critical as any piece of gear you have. It even uses this phrase, the importance of valuing living.
Okay, valuing living. I mean, isn't that, like, kind of a given?
You would think so.
But I guess when you're facing those extreme situations, it takes on a whole new meaning.
It does?
It's about that conscious choice to fight for survival, even when things seem completely hopeless.
Right.
So how does the manual actually help you with that? Like, are there pep talks in there?
Well, not pep talks exactly,
Okay.
but it does offer some pretty solid strategies for staying mentally strong.
Oh, like what?
For instance, it encourages you to focus on what you can control.
Wow.
Set realistic goals and celebrate those small victories.
Oh, I like that.
It's about shifting that mindset from feeling totally overwhelmed by the situation to actually taking charge of your survival.
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're working on our mental toughness, right?
Right.
But what about the practical stuff? Like, let's talk gear.
Okay.
Does the manual have, like, a packing list for the ultimate survival kit?
It does.
It does.
But it's not just a generic list. It's more about tailoring your kit to your specific needs and environment.
That makes sense.
It even gets into the specifics of the container itself,
Yeah.
saying it should be suitable to accept various size components, which I thought was pretty clever.
Suitable to accept various size components. I love how official that sounds.
Right.
So basically, ditch the fancy pre-made kits and build your own based on the challenges you're actually going to face.
Exactly. It's all about understanding your environment,
Right.
anticipating what you'll need.
Yeah.
So are you heading into the desert?
Okay.
Then you'd prioritize things like water storage and sun protection going into the mountains.
Yeah.
Think insulation and fire starting tools, that sort of thing.
Makes
The
sense.
manual really encourages that kind of personalized approach to preparedness.
I like that. It makes survival feel less like a one-size-fits-all and more like a, personalized strategy.
Right.
So let's say we've got our mental game on point. Our custom survival kit is packed. What's the first challenge the manual throws at us?
Well, in almost any survival situation, your most immediate need is going to be water.
Water, of course.
And this manual does not mess around when it comes to the danger of dehydration,
I bet.
especially in those extreme climates.
Yeah.
Did you know that in an arid environment, you can lose over 2.5 liters of water per hour?
Whoa. Okay, that's a lot of water.
It is.
Officially getting thirsty just thinking about that.
Right.
So how much do we need to be drinking to stay ahead of that kind of water loss?
Well, the manual recommends a steady intake of 8 to 12 ounces every 30 minutes in extreme heat.
Okay.
But it also cautions against, get this, drinking too much water too quickly.
Wait, too much water can be dangerous.
It can.
That's wild.
It is. It's a reminder that even with something as essential as water, it's about following the right guidelines.
Right.
Understanding the potential risks.
Makes sense.
The manual is full of these little nuggets of wisdom that go beyond just the basic how-tos.
That's a good point. It's like the manual is training you to think critically about every aspect of survival.
Right.
Not just blindly following instructions.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're hydrated, we're mentally tough, but I'm guessing we're also pretty grimy at this point.
Probably.
Does the manual address hygiene at all?
It does. And it might surprise you how much emphasis it places on staying clean, even in a survival situation.
Really?
It even recommends taking air baths if water is scarce.
Air baths? What on earth is an air bath?
Basically, you remove as much clothing as possible
Okay.
and expose your body to the sun and air for at least an hour.
So you just air out.
Exactly. It helps to dry you off, reduce the risk of skin infections,
Makes sense.
and, well, just feel a little less gross.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually pretty clever. I would have never thought of that.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even in a survival situation, taking care of your basic hygiene can make a huge difference.
Absolutely, for both your physical and mental well-being.
For sure, for sure. So that leads us to another pretty crucial aspect of survival, right?
What's that?
Dealing with injuries.
Ah, yes.
Okay, things are getting a little more intense now. Hit me with the first aid wisdom.
All right, well, the manual has a very comprehensive section on first aid.
Okay.
It stresses the importance of acting quickly, and it provides detailed instructions for all sorts of emergencies.
Gotcha.
The section on controlling bleeding is especially detailed.
Okay.
It even differentiates between arterial and other types of bleeding.
Arterial bleeding. Okay, now I'm a little squeamish.
Yeah.
I get why that's a big deal, but give me like the quick and dirty explanation. What makes arterial bleeding so dangerous?
It all comes down to pressure. Blood in the arteries, it's under much higher pressure than in the veins.
Right.
So when an artery is cut, you can lose a lot of blood very quickly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So the manual, it gives very specific instructions on how to identify and control that type of bleeding,
Okay.
emphasizing, of course, applying direct pressure to that wound.
Got it. Definitely good information to have, even if it is a little unsettling.
Right.
Does the manual cover any other types of injuries?
Oh, it covers a wide range: fractures, dislocations,
Okay.
sprains, burns, even shock.
Wow.
It's like a mini medical textbook packed into this survival guide.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've stabilized our injuries. We're all cleaned up. We're mentally prepared. But I'm guessing we're also pretty exhausted at this point.
Thank you.
Where are we bunking down for the night? What does the manual say about shelter?
Well, it covers a lot of different shelter options.
Okay.
Everything from basic lean-tos to more elaborate structures like debris huts.
Right.
And for those venturing into colder climates,
Yeah.
it even talks about building snow caves.
Snow caves. That sounds surprisingly cozy considering it's made of, well, snow.
I know, right?
What makes a snow cave such a good shelter?
It's all about the insulation.
Okay.
Packed snow, it actually traps heat surprisingly well. Yeah. It creates this relatively warm and sheltered space, even in freezing temperatures.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. And the manual goes into detail on how to choose the right spot for a snow cave,
Okay.
how to excavate the snow, and even how to create ventilation so you avoid that carbon dioxide buildup.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm officially adding build a snow cave to my bucket list.
That's a good one.
But I'm also getting hungry just thinking about all this work.
Yeah.
What's on the menu for dinner tonight? What does the manual say about finding food in the wild?
All right. Well, this is where the manual really encourages you to be resourceful, but also cautious.
Okay. Cautious for sure.
It's all about knowing what's safe to eat and what to avoid at all costs.
Right, because I am definitely not ready to start munching on random berries like some wilderness expert.
Yeah, no, the manual would not recommend that.
Good.
It actually has a whole section on the universal edibility test. The universal edibility test,
Yeah.
which is a very methodical way to test unknown plants
Oh,
for safety before you even think about taking a bite.
okay, good. That is reassuring.
Yeah.
What if there aren't any obvious food sources around? I'm picturing myself just wandering through the wilderness, desperately searching for a stray granola bar or something.
Well, the manual does suggest considering insects as a potential food source.
Insects. Ew. I think I'll pass on that one.
That's fair.
I'd rather stick to those edible plants, even if it means going through that whole edibility test thing.
That's all right, but remember,
Yeah.
in a true survival situation, you might have to push your comfort zone a little bit.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, the manual stresses the importance of staying open-minded and adaptable when it comes to finding food.
Okay, point taken. I'll try to keep an open mind, even if it means facing my fear of creepy crawlies.
Good.
But what if we're not just trying to survive in the wilderness? What if we're trying to evade capture?
Ooh.
Does the manual have any tips for that?
It does. There's a whole chapter on evasion tactics. It covers everything from camouflage and movement to avoiding detection.
Okay, tell me more. What are some of the coolest evasion techniques in there?
One that I found particularly fascinating was the section on scent control.
Scent control. Seriously,
Yeah.
I never knew that was a thing.
It goes into a lot of detail on how to minimize your smell so you don't alert enemies or animals to your presence.
That's incredible. How do you even begin to control your scent in the middle of the wilderness?
It's all about understanding how scent travels
Okay,
and how to disrupt that.
gotcha.
So the manual recommends things like avoiding strong-smelling foods,
Right.
using natural materials to kind of mask your scent, and even paying attention to the wind direction.
Wow. It's like thinking like a tracker.
Exactly.
trying to stay one step ahead.
Yeah,
That's so cool. It's like a real-life spy thriller unfolding in this manual.
it kind of is.
So let's say we've mastered the art of evasion.
Right.
We've survived the elements, found food, stayed hidden.
Okay.
But now we need to get back to safety. We talked about signaling for help.
Yeah.
But what if we need to travel a long distance to actually reach safety? Does the manual cover navigation at all?
It absolutely does. It has a whole chapter on land navigation,
Really?
covering everything from using a compass and a map to reading natural signs and even navigating by the stars.
Navigating by the stars, that sounds incredible. I've always wanted to learn how to do that.
It's pretty cool.
What kind of stars are we talking about here?
Well, the manual focuses mainly on finding Polaris, also known as the North Star,
Oh, Rory, the North Star.
which stays pretty much stationary in the sky, you know?
Right.
And it can help you figure out where you are.
But how do you actually find Polaris amongst all those other stars?
Well, the manual describes a few different methods.
Okay.
One is to use the constellation Ursa Major,
Ursa Major. Okay.
also known as the Big Dipper.
Oh, right, the Big Dipper.
Yeah. So if you follow the two stars at the end of the Dipper's cup,
Okay.
they point almost directly at Polaris.
That's amazing. It's like a built-in celestial compass.
It is.
I'm definitely going to try that out next time I'm stargazing.
Cool.
But let's say we're in like a really dense forest or something.
Okay.
And we can't see the stars. What other navigation tricks does the manual have up its sleeve?
Well, it talks about paying attention to natural features in the landscape,
Oh, interesting.
like which way is the water flowing,
Right.
or the patterns of moss on trees.
Huh.
These little clues can help you get your bearings and figure out which way to go.
Wow. It's amazing how much you can learn from nature if you just know what to look for.
It is.
This manual is turning me into a regular wilderness detective.
I love it.
But I have to admit, I am feeling a little vulnerable out here in the wild.
Yeah, I get that.
Does the manual address self-defense at all?
It does.
It does.
But it emphasizes avoiding dangerous situations whenever possible.
Of course, of course.
So it talks about being aware of your surroundings,
Right.
traveling in groups, and projecting confidence to deter any potential threats.
Okay.
But it does cover some basic self-defense techniques,
Oh, okay. Like what?
using improvised weapons.
Improvised weapons. Like what? I'm picturing myself fighting off a bear with a sharpened stick.
Well, it does talk about choosing the right weapon for the situation,
Right.
but it focuses on using everyday objects that you can easily find
Okay.
or modify for self-defense.
Gotcha. So things like rocks.
Rocks, sticks,
Okay.
even a sturdy backpack
Right.
can be used pretty effectively in a pinch.
Okay. That makes me feel a little more empowered.
Good.
It's good to know that even without like specialized weapons, you can still defend yourself if you absolutely have to.
You can.
But honestly, I'm hoping it doesn't come to that.
Me too.
This deep dive has definitely given me a newfound appreciation for how complex survival is.
It is complex.
And the importance of being prepared.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It's been an eye-opening journey, hasn't it?
It has.
And guess what? We're not even done yet.
Oh, there's more.
We still have more ground to cover in our next segment.
Oh man, I can't wait. Stay tuned, everyone, because things are about to get even more wild. All right, we're back and ready to dive even deeper into the survival manual.
Deeper we go.
Last time, we were talking about everything from building snow caves to signaling for help with mirrors.
Lots of good stuff.
But I have a feeling we've only just scratched the surface here.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What other, like, hidden gems are lurking in this treasure trove of survival wisdom?
Well, we touched on how important water is,
Right, of course.
but we haven't really explored how to actually find water in the wild.
Good point.
It's not always as easy as, like, stumbling upon a crystal clear stream, you know?
Right. And I'm really hoping it doesn't involve drinking my own pee, like those survival shows sometimes suggest.
Yeah, no, the manual doesn't go quite that far.
Okay, good.
It does talk about conserving bodily fluids in, like, really extreme situations.
Right.
But it actually encourages you to think a little outside the box when it comes to water sources.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of unconventional water sources are we talking about?
For example, did you know that certain plants can be a really good source of water?
Plants.
Right.
Really? I mean, I know they need water to survive, but I never really thought of them as like a source of drinking water.
Oh, yeah.
So which plants are we talking about? And how do you even get the water out of them?
Well, the manual lists a bunch of different plants, like plantain, banana trees,
Okay.
even bamboo. They all contain drinkable water.
Wow.
Sometimes it's as simple as, like, cutting a section of the plant
Yeah.
and collecting the sap that drips out.
Oh, okay.
Other times you might have to crush the plant to get the moisture out.
Huh. Interesting.
It's pretty amazing how nature provides these, like, hidden sources of hydration,
Yeah.
if you know where to look.
That's so cool. But what about in a desert environment? Like, there's not a lot of lush vegetation out there.
Right. Well, that's where the manual section on desert survival comes in.
Okay.
It actually has a whole chapter on finding water in arid environments.
Okay, now you've really got my attention.
Right.
What kind of magic are we talking about here? Is there some, like, secret desert oasis that I've just been missing?
Not quite an oasis,
Okay.
but the manual describes how to build a solar still.
A solar still.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm vaguely familiar with the concept, but walk me through it. How do you build one of those things in the middle of the desert?
It's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
You dig a pit in the ground, line it with a plastic sheet,
Okay.
and then you place a container right in the center.
All right.
The sun heats up that pit, causing any moisture in the ground to evaporate.
Right.
And that water vapor, it condenses on the underside of the plastic and drips down into your container.
That is pretty ingenious.
It is, right?
Like, it's amazing how resourceful you can be with just a few basic materials.
It is,
Okay, build a solar still,
Right.
going on the bucket list.
for sure.
But hold on, how do you know that the water you collect from plants or a solar still is actually safe to drink?
That is a great question, and the manual does not shy away from it.
Okay, good.
It has a whole section on water purification,
All right.
outlining different methods for making sure your water is good to go.
Okay, I'm guessing boiling is like the classic go-to method. Does the manual suggest anything else?
Boiling definitely works,
Yeah.
but it also describes using water purification tablets,
Oh, right.
which are super convenient to carry in your kit.
For sure.
It even gets into making a makeshift filter,
What, really?
using charcoal, sand, and gravel.
A DIY water filter? That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like this manual is turning you into a MacGyver of the wilderness.
That's the goal.
All right, so we've found water.
We have.
We've purified it. We're hydrated, feeling good.
Excellent.
What's next on the survival agenda?
Well, let's talk about fire.
Fire.
It's essential for so many things: warmth, cooking, signaling.
Right, fire is like the ultimate survival multi-tool.
It really is.
But let's be honest, starting a fire in the wild is not exactly easy.
It can be
What kind of fire-starting wisdom does the manual offer?
Well, it covers a bunch of different techniques.
Okay.
From modern methods like using lighters or matches
Yeah.
to more primitive techniques
Like what?
like using a flint and steel or a fire plow.
Flint and steel, that sounds so ancient and cool. How does that even work?
It's surprisingly simple, but it does take some practice.
I bet.
Basically, you strike a piece of flint against a steel striker,
Okay.
and that creates sparks that you then catch on a piece of tinder.
What kind of tinder works best for that? I'm picturing myself like frantically trying to light a pile of damp leaves on fire.
Yeah, you're going to want something a little drier than that.
Right.
The manual gives a whole list of suitable tinder materials.
Right.
Dry grass, bark, bird nests,
Okay.
even lint from your clothes.
Lint. Seriously.
Yep.
That's amazing. I would never have thought of that.
It's all about being resourceful, right?
Okay, so we've managed to create a spark. We've got our tinder bundle all prepped. Now, how do we build that up into a roaring bonfire?
Well, the manual describes different fire layouts,
Okay.
each with its own advantages and disadvantages.
Gotcha.
One of the most basic and effective layouts is the teepee fire.
Oh, the teepee fire. Okay, yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Remind me how that one works again.
So you start by making a little cone of tinder and kindling,
Okay.
and then you gradually add larger pieces of wood around it,
All right.
building up that teepee-like structure.
Right.
This shape allows for good airflow, which helps create a strong, sustainable flame.
That makes sense. All right, so we've got our fire going, we've got purified water, we're feeling pretty good about our survival skills.
Awesome.
But what if we need to actually like get OT of this situation? We talked about signaling for help.
Yeah.
But what if we need to travel a long distance to reach safety? Does the manual cover navigation at all?
It sure does. There's a whole chapter dedicated to land navigation,
Really?
covering everything from using a compass and a map
Okay.
to reading natural signs, even navigating by the stars.
Navigating by the stars. That sounds amazing. I've always wanted to learn how to do that.
It's pretty cool.
What kind of stars are we talking about?
Well, the manual focuses on Polaris, the North Star,
Oh, right. Polaris, the North Star. Yeah.
which, as you know, stays pretty much fixed in the sky
Right, right.
and can help you get your bearings.
But how do you actually find Polaris amongst all the other stars out there?
There are a few different ways. One is to use the constellation Ursa Major,
Ursa Major.
it's also known as the Big Dipper.
Oh, the Big Dipper. I know that one.
So if you follow the two stars at the end of the Dipper's cup,
Uh-huh.
they point almost directly at Polaris.
That's so cool. It's like a built-in celestial compass. I'm totally going to try that out next time I'm stargazing.
A good one.
But let's say we're in an area with like really dense vegetation and we can't see the stars.
Yeah.
What other navigation tricks does the manual have up its sleeve?
Well, it talks about paying attention to natural features in the landscape. Things like which direction the water is flowing. Right. Or the growth patterns of moss on trees.
Interesting.
These subtle little clues, they can help you figure out where you are and which way to go.
Wow. It's amazing how much you can learn from nature
It is.
if you just pay attention.
Absolutely.
This manual is turning me into a regular wilderness detective.
I love it.
I have to admit, though, I'm feeling a little vulnerable out here in the wild.
I get it.
Does the manual address self-defense at all?
It does.
It does.
But it really stresses avoiding dangerous situations whenever possible.
Right, avoidance is key.
So it talks about being aware of your surroundings,
Okay.
traveling in groups if you can,
Yeah,
and projecting confidence to deter any potential threats.
that makes sense.
But it does also cover some basic self-defense techniques,
Like what?
using improvised weapons.
Improvised weapons? Okay, like what? I'm picturing myself fending off a bear with a sharpened stick or something.
Well, the manual does talk about choosing the right weapon for this situation.
Of course, right?
But it focuses mainly on using everyday objects that you can easily find
Right.
or modify for self-defense.
Okay, like,
Things like rocks, sticks,
okay.
even a sturdy backpack
Right.
can be pretty effective in a pinch.
Okay, that makes me feel a little more empowered. It's good to know that even without, like, specialized weapons,
Yeah,
you can still defend yourself if you absolutely have to.
exactly.
But honestly, I'm really hoping it doesn't come to that.
Me too.
This deep dive has really given me a newfound appreciation for how complex survival is
It is complex.
and the importance of being prepared.
It's crucial.
Wow,
It's been quite a journey so far, hasn't it?
it really has.
And we're not done yet.
There's more.
We still have more to uncover in our next segment.
Oh man, I can't wait. Stay tuned, everyone, because things are about to get even wilder.
All right, we're back for the final stretch of our deep dive into the U.S. Army Field Manual on Survival.
Time to wrap things up.
I know, it's flown by. We've covered so much ground finding water in the desert.
Navigating by the stars. Yeah, all that good stuff. It's amazing how much practical knowledge is packed into this thing.
It really is comprehensive.
But I'm curious, after all this discussion, what are your biggest takeaways? What's really stuck with you?
Well, what I find fascinating is how the manual blends those practical survival skills with the psychology of survival.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we've talked about building shelters, purifying water,
Uh-huh.
but it's so clear that mental resilience
You're right.
and a positive mindset, they're just as crucial for actually making it through a tough situation.
Yeah, totally. It's like you could have all the fanciest gear in the world,
Yeah.
but if you just panic and lose your cool, you're done for.
Absolutely. The manual really emphasizes that your biggest enemy out there
Yeah,
might be your own fear.
that's a good point.
And that's why it spends so much time on those strategies for staying calm, focused, motivated,
Right.
even when things seem totally hopeless.
Like what kind of strategies?
Well, it's about recognizing those negative thoughts
Yeah.
and replacing them with more constructive ones.
Like-
So instead of thinking, I'm lost, I'll never be found,
Yeah.
you shift that to, okay, I'm temporarily disoriented,
Yeah.
but I have the skills to find my way back.
I like that.
It's about taking control of your mental state
Yeah.
and using that to your advantage.
That is such a powerful shift in perspective. Like you're not just enduring the situation,
Right.
you're actively engaging with it
You are.
and figuring out how to overcome those obstacles.
Exactly.
It's almost like a mental survival kit alongside your physical one.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah, and building that mental toughness, it takes practice,
Uh-huh.
even outside of a survival situation.
Oh, for sure.
The manual talks about the importance of having a positive attitude every day,
Right.
setting realistic goals, celebrating those little wins.
Those little victories.
It's about building those mental muscles so you're ready to handle stress and adversity no matter what.
Yeah, that is great advice. And that applies to so much more than just survival, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like building resilience for life in general.
For sure.
Okay, so we've talked general survival tips, but I'm curious to see how the manual tackles specific environments.
Okay.
Because surviving in the desert has got to be a whole different ballgame than surviving in the Arctic.
You are absolutely right. And the manual actually dedicates entire chapters to specific environments.
It does.
Yeah, because it recognizes that each one has its own unique challenges.
Oh, for sure.
So, for example, in the desert chapter,
Mm-hmm.
it really stresses minimizing sun exposure and conserving water.
Of course, makes sense.
But up in the Arctic, it's all about staying warm and dry.
Right, right.
You have to adapt.
So it's not just about memorizing a bunch of survival skills.
Right.
It's about adapting those skills to whatever environment you find yourself in.
That's the key.
It's like a manual is teaching you how to be a problem solver.
Yes.
Not just a rule follower.
Exactly. It's about understanding the principles of survival
Right.
and then applying them creatively to all these different situations.
That's cool.
It's about becoming a student of your environment,
Yeah.
observing those little details
Uh-huh.
and using them to your advantage.
I love that. It's like the manual is turning you into a wilderness detective.
I love that analogy.
Right. Constantly gathering clues and solving the puzzle of survival.
Exactly.
Speaking of puzzles, there's one aspect of this manual I'm really curious about.
What's that?
And it's a bit of a dark one. Does the manual address survival in a post-nuclear environment?
It does, and it's a pretty sobering chapter, to be honest.
Yeah, I bet.
It acknowledges the potential threat of nuclear conflict, obviously,
Uh-huh.
and outlines some strategies for surviving in that kind of radioactive environment.
Okay, that just sent chills down my spine. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's important to be informed, right?
It is, it is.
What are some of the key takeaways from that chapter?
Well, it really emphasizes finding shelter immediately after a detonation
Right,
to minimize that radiation exposure
of course.
and staying indoors as long as possible to avoid contact with fallout.
Fallout. What exactly is fallout and why is it so dangerous?
Well, fallout is the radioactive dust and debris that gets released into the atmosphere after a nuclear explosion.
Oh, right.
And it can contaminate water, food, even the air we breathe.
Wow.
It's a serious health risk. So the manual, it gives very specific instructions on how to identify and avoid those fallout areas,
Okay.
and also how to decontaminate yourself and your surroundings if you've been exposed.
That is intense stuff. It's a good reminder that survival isn't always about wilderness adventures.
It's not.
And building fires, sometimes it's about facing much more serious threats.
You're right.
So we've talked about the manual's advice.
We have.
But after all of this, what would you do if you were in a survival situation?
Oh, that's a great question.
What are the first three things that would pop into your head?
Well, the first thing I do is take a deep breath and assess the situation.
Okay.
Figure out my immediate needs.
Right.
Is there any immediate danger? Do I have any injuries? What are my basic needs? Shelter, water, warmth.
Right. The essentials.
It's about understanding your resources and making a plan.
Okay. Assess, prioritize, plan. That makes sense. What would your next step be?
I would focus on signaling for help.
Oh, right.
Even if I felt confident about surviving on my own, I'd want to increase my chances of rescue.
Of course.
Use whatever I could build a fire, ground-to-air signals, a mirror, anything to get attention.
Right, because even if you're a survival expert, there's no shame in calling for help.
Not at all.
It's about being smart, using all the tools you've got.
Absolutely.
So assess, signal. What's the third thing?
A third thing, and this is just as important as the physical stuff,
Yeah.
is to maintain a positive mental attitude.
Ah, so important.
I'd remind myself that I have the skills to survive
Yeah.
and focus on what I can control.
Right, right.
I'd also try to find beauty in the world around me, even in a difficult situation.
I love that. It's not just about gritting your teeth and enduring. It's about finding those moments of peace,
Right.
beauty, even joy in the midst of it all.
Exactly.
It's about remembering what makes life worth living even when things get tough.
Well said.
That's what it's all about.
It is. It's about tapping into that inner strength,
Yeah.
that resilience we all have, and remembering that even in the darkest times, there's always hope.
I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
We've all learned so much from this deep dive into the U.S. Army Field Manual on Survival.
It's been a good way.
It's been an incredible journey,
It is.
full of practical tips, but also a reminder of the power of the human spirit.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for being here to break it all down with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, the most important survival tool you have is your own mind.
You got it.
So keep learning, keep practicing, and keep exploring. That's all for this deep dive.
Until next time.
Stay curious, stay prepared, and stay alive.